Hi, this is Jack Downs from the Community Garden with a little garden orientation for people, a video message as opposed to our group meeting, which was canceled because of the pandemic situation. Before I begin with some specific things about pandemic reaction and what to do with the garden, and then some more general policies, love to hear from me and a little message from the garden. Hi, this is a brief introduction to a couple of things in the garden that you'll need to know this year that are different. After I introduce you to these, I'm going to be doing a little slideshow just talking about some of the garden policies that you have to adhere to. So a few things are going to be different this year though. One thing is that we really ask everyone to be extremely cautious about social distancing in the pandemic situation. So make sure that when you're at the garden, you are staying at least 6 feet away from other gardeners, and make sure that in the shed, only one person is in the shed at a time. We want to make sure we don't get any groups of people trying to get into the shed. In general, the only big concerns that we have, and we've talked to the city and so on about this, is at both our sheds, at both our plots. The big concern we have is the possibility of contamination of our tools and perhaps of our locks. So we will have in the sheds a tub of soap, of liquid dish soap actually, that will be available to wash the tools. Now when you approach the lock for the first time, the issue is, has the lock been used by somebody and not been cleaned? We've heard that some people may want to bring their own sanitizing wipes. That would be a good idea. If nothing else, after you use the lock, we suggest you wash your hands with the soap that's inside using the water that's available in the garden. Likewise, when you take the tools, we suggest that you wash the tools for use also. On the other hand, if you prefer to wear gloves, that would be fine also, or if you prefer to bring your own tools. The final thing is, when you get done with the lock, please make sure that you ideally use a sanitizing wipe to clean it, or at least wash your hands before you leave. This goes for the lock here and at the water also. There's one more thing I want to show you that's not to do with the pandemic, but to do with the size of garden plots. So we'll go check that out right now. Before I begin with some specific things about pandemic reaction and what to do with the garden, and then some more general policies, love to hear from me and a little message from the garden. Okay, now let's continue with some specifics about what I was talking about. First of all, you'll see notes about this probably on the front of the sheds. If you are sick, please don't come to the garden or immediately leave the garden. Don't return until at least 14 days after you are well. If for any reason, because you become sick or for any other reason, you can't tend to your plot, let us know. We'll try to help you out. We'll try to keep your plot going if it's a temporary situation. If it's a longer term situation, we'll try to get your plot handed over to somebody else. Please let us know if things happen and you can't tend to your plot, and we'll try to help you out one way or the other. While you are at the garden during this time of social isolation and so on, please, after using the locks or tools, wash your hands. We plan to leave soap, tub of dish soap actually, in the sheds. Also, wash your tools after using them. So, well, the garden's tools actually is what I'm referring to. So we're talking about hand tools, rakes, shovels, forks, and the small tools that you might use, trowels and so on, in the garden itself. To make it a little easier, in addition to the soap, we will be leaving some rags in the shed, which hopefully after you use them, you can wring them out and try to hang them up as best as you can inside. So you could use those to scrub or wash over the portions of the tools that you were holding. Small tools can be put into a pail and soap added and just sudsed up like that. Soap and water is our best protection here, and as is frequent hand washing. So please do that. If for some reason the soap is missing, please leave the soap and the rags and so on in the shed. But for some reason it's missing and you don't have any protection of your own, we suggest that you let us know and don't use the equipment. Again, also no more than one person in the shed at any time. and keep a social distance between you and any other gardeners, unless you come together and you're related and so on, or living together in the same household. Otherwise, it's at least 6 feet between you. This shouldn't be a problem in the garden, as there's frequently not people working side by side. But if it does happen that someone is doing something that you want to do, just be patient and wait until they're done, and then go and do it so you don't get too close to them. Other options to consider, things that could help you out, could help us out also. Perhaps you want to wear gloves while you're working to protect yourself. That would be a great idea, wearing gloves. Perhaps you want to bring sanitizing wipes of your own to clean the locks, for instance, before and after you use them. That would be great. Thank you very much. Perhaps you want to bring your own soap to wash your hands with at the garden. That would be great. Thank you again. Or perhaps you even want to bring your own tools, hand tools of some kind, so you don't have to worry about possible contamination. That would be great too. So please consider those things. Okay, I think we're going to move on to the more traditional part of the presentation. However, I will say of the 3 R's I usually talk about, responsibility now means a lot more. Actually, all of these could be applied to the pandemic: realizing, respecting, responsibility. Realize that you have to keep your plot in good order throughout the season. That means right now, like very soon, you would turn over your cover crop if you had one, or at least turn over your plot, dig out any weeds that are apparent, add compost if it's available. If it's not available immediately, sometimes there's delays, consider getting your own compost. Adding compost at the beginning of the season is a great idea. And in general, by the end of June, and these days, I would say even sooner than that, perhaps by even mid-June, we want you to have gotten a good start planted. And your plot should certainly be fully planted by mid-July, if not early July. These seasons this year are starting earlier and earlier these years, so these dates could be moved up a little bit. We want to see activity in your plot right away, preparing it, and then some planting, probably through mid-May, and then well planted through June to be at least fully planted and well underway, with constant checking up on it through mid-July. We're asking you to weed often, water often, harvest frequently, replant, consider use the territory you have and keep reusing and reusing it as you harvest. Add compost regularly, clean promptly in the fall. Those are just some of the things to keep track of. I suggest, rather than making like a single time to come like once a week or something, if you can stop by a couple or 3 times a week, even briefly, to check things out, that'll be a little easier for you. Be more constant supervision of your plot, constant weeding to not let things get out of control. And we'll get into later in the year, in the really hot, drier times, you may want to water at least every day. And watering, we suggest you water early in the morning or late in the evening. Make sure you water the plants and not the leaves as we get later on. Also, we suggest watering, light watering, at least light watering, when you plant things, plant seeds too, and then at least for a few days afterwards as things get going, unless we get significant amounts of rain. Please remember, you have to be a good neighbor. You have to avoid tall structures. Nothing should be over 6 feet, and we suggest 5 is probably a better number. That means like stakes and trellises and so on. And we do not want you to plant sunflowers unless they are the dwarf variety. Please, no sunflowers. We don't want you to plant corn unless it's a dwarf variety. Please, no corn or any other plants or structures that are tall. You'll be shadowing your neighbor's plots, and potentially if it falls over, it's in their plot also. Respect the borders. Don't let your plants go out into the pathways. Don't disturb other plots or plants. Keep your hands out of other people's plots. Don't pick their stuff. Keep your plot size under control. Beware of expanding plots. Oh, I have a message about this, and I'll show you what I mean a little bit better from the garden itself. One of the issues at the Penfield Garden in particular is the width of the plots. Some of the plots have become kind of wide. This is an example of a nice width plot. I just want to show you that our plot should be no wider than 4 feet. If your plot has become wide, just from normal action of weeding and tilling, make sure that you they try to bring it back to its normal size. Okay, that was mostly an issue for the Penfield garden. You don't have that problem over at PHA. In all our gardens, you have to garden organically. You may not use any synthetic fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, or chemical fertilizers. Um, so please, the things that you might have done in your own garden on your own property are not allowed in this garden. It has to be completely organic and no synthetic additives. We will have pests and problems this year. Hopefully, we won't have bigger problems with the pandemic precautions and so on. That's a whole other level of concern and anxiety. But there's always problems with gardening. It's part of the deal. Like what? Like maybe tomato blight. Like maybe leaf mildew, especially on zucchini and other squashes and so on. Like maybe flea beetles. Like maybe Japanese beetles. Like maybe leek moths. On and on. Potato bugs. On and on. These things happen and tend to happen a little more with so many people gardening in close proximity to each other. Watch for suggestions on our Facebook site, perhaps even an email when we run into these problems. Or if you're using anything to try to alleviate them, remember, again, it has to be organic. And these things do happen, so there's a way to protect yourself and to hopefully help things to improve a little bit, but sometimes things do go wrong. So we want you to prepare for that possibility. The other thing that can go wrong is sometimes at our plots, and we do have issues of vandalism, some years worse than others. That's why we have some signs up around the gardens. But we encourage you to keep an eye out for the garden, to watch for people who are behaving suspiciously in the garden, to report problems, call the police if there's any question of safety or danger or anything like that, of course, or you see anyone actually damaging things, of course, please call the police. But in general, on the other hand, gardening in public places means sometimes things do happen. Sometimes there is vandalism, and it can't be eliminated completely. If it happens to you, certainly let us know. And certainly we're very sorry, but it cannot be. We want you to know ahead of time. So you're not completely surprised if something like this happens, that it can't be completely prevented. Pitch in, help out, communicate. That will be a little different this year. You'll see a note later on about us having work days, but we will not be having group work days, though I will be sending out messages, or other board members will be sending out messages saying, hey, here's some things we need help with when you are there working with social distancing in by yourself. Can you help us by maybe doing a little cleaning in the shed, or maybe doing a little bit of other work, sorting out or straightening up our compost pile or something. We ask that everybody put now all their compost material in the large bin at Penfield. At PHA, there is a pile that started. That means all garden refuse. But at no garden, in neither garden, are you allowed to bring in any of your own refuse, or even if it's organic, even if it's from your kitchen or whatever, from your home. We only dispose of garden-related things at the garden. And we no longer have any 3-bin composting. We suggest everything be put into this pile. We ask you please take care of the garden equipment and let us know about problems that develop with it. The work days, as I said, are not going to be the case any longer. We do have hose systems for watering, of course, that will be put in once we get the water turned on, and then a little later. Sometimes the hoses have problems. You can certainly alert us. Sometimes there's a delay in fixing them. We suggest you be careful with the hoses. In particular, this is particularly a problem at Penfield, where we don't have a lot of barriers between the plots as well. Make sure you drag the hose where you want it, then turn the hose on, then use it, then turn it off. And once the hose is charged with water, it becomes like a stick. It can damage other plots. So please be careful with the hoses around plots. So you don't drag them through plots or bang into other plots. Please be courteous to your neighbors and don't damage other plots with the hoses. And then if there's a water problem and you have to use some other watering method, we do have watering containers in the sheds that you can use to fill and then water by hand. And one last thing, we ask that you keep all the sheds secure and the water secure, that you lock them when you're not using them. In particular, if you unlock something like the shed or the water at any of your locations, and then other gardeners appear and are working from a safe social distance, please ask them if they want to use those things before you leave. If so, they take responsibility for it, great. You can leave and leave them open. If they say no, they don't need to use them, then if you've opened them, it's your responsibility to lock them. So in other words, it's your responsibility to either lock them or to get somebody else to take that responsibility. Okay, and as far as communicating with us, you will see in the sheds there is a list of garden board members with phone numbers and email addresses. You certainly can use that to reach out to us anytime. We also receive communications via Facebook, so you can post there, message us there, and those are the key ways to get a hold of us. Only other thing I can mention that's changed this year is we're not going to be having a garden mentor program for new gardeners, but we do ask if any gardeners have any problems, just communicate with us via email and or phone from those lists that are listed in the shed and or on Facebook. We can help you out with especially with new gardeners that have questions or problems. This may be a bit different way of starting for the new gardeners this season, but we think with everyone being careful, we can all have a good season. And let us know about any problems or questions.